you look around this chapel or any room with people that you find yourself in, you can assume that you are among survivors of sexual assault and harassment. In this room, I can guarantee it because I am one of them. And I'm probably not the only one. 1 in 5 women, 1 in 14 men have experienced sexual assault in our country. Growing up, I remember hearing stories about sexual misconduct in other faith communities and even in some Jewish denominations. Yet there was something about us that made me believe we were immune. In my early 20s, while interning for a child advocacy center working to combat child sexual abuse, I began to understand that with such devastating statistics, no community could be entirely safe from predators. In this week's Parsha Lech Lecha, Abram and Sarai are following God's directions to an unknown land. Early in their journey, there was a famine in the Negev, so they made their way to Egypt in order to survive. Assuming that the Egyptians would kill him for his wife, Abram begged Sarai to masquerade as his sister. Sarai was taken to the Pharaoh by his attendants, and in exchange for their safe passage, the Pharaoh had his way with her. This scene in Lech Lecha is often dismissed by saying Abram had no choice. He did what he had to do in order to survive. Maybe they would have been killed if they had told the truth, but it was still a choice that he made. We don't know if Sarai had a choice because her voice is missing from this story. We know that her husband begged her and that she was taken to the Pharaoh by his attendants. We know that Abram was rewarded and that they were set free, and God retaliated against the Pharaoh. But we have no idea how Sarai reacted. Was she scared? Did she fight back? Was she compliant? Was she enraged? How was she when she returned to Abram? Did they ever speak of it again? We won't ever know how she suffered that day, or in her many years that followed, or how their marriage, which guided our people's story, was affected by this trauma. Sarai's silence is synonymous with the silence of many sexual assault victims today. Their voices and their stories go unheard for so many reasons. For some, it is too painful to revisit those moments. Others are encouraged or intimidated into keeping quiet. Some worry about retribution in the forms of job loss, shame, and fear of further abuse. Some do not survive to tell their stories. In March of this year, reports about sexual misconduct of and by clergy working in Reformed Jewish institutions were exposed in the press. We learned about female clergy who were harassed by their male clergy counterparts and by board members. We heard about male clergy harassing and assaulting members of their congregations. It was even uncovered that a former teacher of our college engaged in an ongoing, non-consensual sexual relationship with a female student of his synagogue. With these actions gone unchecked, he was later appointed president of HUC-JIR. In response to this story, the Women's Rabbinic Network declared, "For almost 50 years, the Reform movement has been ordaining and failing its female-identified rabbis and other forms of marginalized groups. We believe that our movement and its institutions have the obligation and the ability to bring meaningful healing and profound change to Reform Judaism and to the Jewish world." Soon after, the Union for Reform Judaism released a statement announcing that they, along with HUC-JIR and the Central Conference of American Rabbis, had secured separate independent law firms to investigate claims of sexual harassment and assault over the past many years. These investigations went on for several months. Survivors were asked to come forward and speak with these lawyers to share their stories. While the promise of confidentiality through the law firm was helpful, It could not shield survivors from the pain that comes every time we share our stories and relive our trauma. As a community, we owe a significant debt of gratitude to the survivors who have come forward, both publicly and privately. I am grateful that our movement's major institutions responded by acknowledging that the problem exists and beginning to address it. But these investigations have only scratched the surface of what our community needs from its leadership. From my own experience and from conversations with colleagues, I am confident in stating that these abuses are not only a problem of our past, but also a problem of our present and likely one of our future. The only way we can survive the painful parts of our personal and communal stories is by facing them directly and actively working to repair what is broken. While collecting stories and data that will help shape future policy of these institutions is a necessary and important step of this process, it is just that, one step. Our process of repairing what is broken should go far beyond changing policies. Mishnah teaches, one who injures another person is liable on 5 counts: for the damage caused, for the pain inflicted, for support of the healing process, compensation for lost time, and amends for humiliation caused. From this, we can learn that when a member of our community is harmed by another, we should ensure that they have support, access to the necessary resources, the ability to comfortably and safely attend community functions, and in the best case scenario, a path to justice. Our sages teach that God cannot atone for sins between humans. Rather, one can only gain forgiveness once they have offered sincere and direct apologies to the individuals harmed. Institutions and individuals who have caused harm along the way, knowingly or unknowingly, should take full and public responsibility for their actions and seek direct forgiveness from those who were harmed. Sometimes we don't pay attention to what happens in our own community when we think it doesn't affect us. But this affects all of us. Our community is not a set of binaries, victims versus perpetrators. We each have a role to play in the healing fabric that creates a safer world for survivors. We cannot continue to delay addressing the healing process while we wait for policies to change. I would like to see community leaders take action by creating spaces for healing within our schools, our synagogues, and our professional communities. I envision the space of healing to serve those abused within our community, those abused outside of our community, and those who have lost trust in our community after observing the abuses of others. We could develop support groups in synagogues and Jewish community centers. We could start an anonymous hotline staffed with trauma-informed experts. We could create matching programs to connect survivors for peer support. We could, we should, and together we will.